From the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador, I am Estefania Bravo, and this is from the Salvador. We start with breaking news. Authorities in the United States have arrested Juan Antonio Hernandez, the brother of Honduran President Juan Orlando Hernandez. He was arrested on charges related to drug trafficking. A statement by the government of Honduras confirmed Juan Antonio Hernandez's arrest in the city of Miami. The statement highlights the government's stance that every person is responsible for their own actions and that responsibility is not transferable to others. Brazilian authorities have announced they have identified some of the individuals involved in the murder of councilwoman and human rights activist Mayel Franco. The state's public security department has confirmed that paramilitary militia groups were involved in the murder of Franco, a fierce advocate for the rights of the country's marginalized groups. She was gunned down alongside her driver on the 14th of March. The first of thousands of doctors who were working in Brazil as part of the More Doctors program have started to arrive back in Havana. The doctors were pulled out of Brazil by the Cuban government after Brazilian President-elect Jair Bolsonaro made offensive comments about them. Cuban President Miguel Díaz-Canel received the first group of doctors in Havana, thanking them for their humanitarian service. Their departure will leave a medical vacuum across the country and millions of Brazilians without access to health care.
It's a day of great joy, but also of great sadness for the Brazilian people that we know will miss us. Many will be left without medical attention, but I'm also very happy to return with my head held high.
And as he welcomed the doctors back, President Díaz-Canel defended his decision to pull them out of Brazil, but also assured them they had done their duty.
Our answer was the proper one. It is a courageous answer, one that defends the principles of the Cuban Revolution. It was impossible for a government with huge neoliberal pride to understand that people like you can go to a country to offer health services selflessly. I know you're worried for those patients who are going to be left vulnerable without access to health care, but you have to be certain that you have honorably fulfilled your duty.
Let's find out more about the doctor's departure in this report.
400 doctors flew back to Brasília's international airport. They were among 8,000 doctors who were part of the More Doctors program in Brazil.
I worked in the state of Paraná. Next month, I would have worked there for 2 years. My job was very hard because I was helping a community in poverty. They really needed a doctor to help the people there.
4 Cuban doctors were working in the municipality of Caetes, a very humble and modest municipality, but with a big heart. We can only thank the people of Brazil that welcomed us here.
In order to reduce the impact of the doctors' withdrawal from over 1,000 municipalities, 200 will leave on a daily basis as opposed to a mass exodus.
When things started to get heated, I tried to alert everyone. I also tried to move up the home visits.
Unfortunately, these patients will now lack medical care, the type of care that allows a doctor to pay a home visit when they can't go to a hospital.
The safe return of all doctors by January next year is priority for Cuba's health ministry.
Tensions have started to run high at the United States-Mexico border. Security measures by U.S. troops to stop members of the migrant caravan have been causing delays for people waiting to cross into the U.S., heading home for Thanksgiving. Drills by the troops have caused the temporary shutdown of the vehicle crossing, leading to long waits. Migrants have continued to gather in front of the border crossing every day, hoping to request asylum in the U.S. Mexican authorities believe the wait time for migrants could be up to 6 months. And in the face of the growing migrant caravan, the mayor of Tijuana has asked for help from Mexico's Interior Ministry and the United Nations, calling the caravan a growing humanitarian crisis.
The Interior Ministry is legally forced to implement actions that will allow us to give the proper support for the migrants who face situations of vulnerability. With regards to what I said and adding, they have categorically ignored fulfilling their duty. We are requesting the Interior Ministry and different international groups to have to do with humanitarian topics. We want them to send humanitarian help on behalf of the United Nations.
Some Central American migrants fleeing poverty and violence are choosing to travel to Spain over the United States because of the Trump administration's anti-migrant policies. However, as soon as they arrive in, their hardships are far from over. After selling all their possessions to pay for flights, many of them have to sleep on the streets without warm clothes or food.
As a father, I want to say, I would only ask for something for my son. It doesn't matter if I don't get any benefits. I'd like them to be able to have a better future. We are not asking for much. During the few days we have been here, we have seen the good conditions in which people here live.
Teachers from across Ecuador have taken to the streets of Quito to protest against what they say are the failed campaign promises of President Lenín Moreno. They are marching towards the presidential palace to demand a meeting with the president. The public school teachers say they haven't received a wage increase in over a decade. President Moreno had reportedly promised to raise their salaries during his presidential campaign, but has failed to do so.
We're here because President Moreno promised to raise our wages during his campaign. We deserve a raise, and he must give it to us.
We have come to defend our rights and to stand against budget cuts in the education sector. President Moreno has not kept any of his campaign promises.
Social movements in El Salvador are demanding that political parties declare access to water as a human right. Let's find out more in this report.
Members of the National Alliance Against Water Privatization went to the headquarters of right-wing political parties like Gana, Arena, and PDC to demand that their presidential candidates stand against water privatization.
We demand that political parties stop debating water privatization. Instead, they should move on to debate a law that solves the water crisis in El Salvador. So far, none of these presidential candidates have addressed this issue.
The fight against water privatization has been going on for more than 13 years. The attempts by public companies to have control over water sources is what has forced various social sectors to demand water be deemed a human right. And since June of this year, right-wing political parties have held a majority in the Legislative Assembly.
The candidate's discourse must be coherent with the party's discourse. For example, Arena has promised not to privatize water, but they don't want to debate further than that.
The water crisis in the country is alarming. Water is mainly used by the sugarcane industry and also by soft drink companies that heavily contaminate rivers in the country.
They say water will not be privatized, but they want private companies to manage water sources. So we're talking about the same thing. What we demand is a public governing body and also citizen participation.
The governing plans of political parties have started to be presented, and the FMLN has compromised to protect the environment and not to privatize water. Other political parties have expressed the same sentiments, but social movements say they have trouble believing them.
We'll be back very soon. Stay with us.
Telesur brings you special interviews with social and political personalities. Monday, from Washington. Tuesday, from Mexico. Wednesday, from Caracas. Thursday, from Quito. Friday, from Havana. Analysis about our continent's reality. Weekdays, only on Telesur.
Welcome back. A South African court has ruled that the government will have to obtain full and formal consent from local communities before granting mining rights. This in the case where a local community group had taken the government and an Australian mining company to court to stop the development of a titanium mine on their land. Amnesty International said the judgment was a victory for marginalized communities across the world. Zambia Supreme Court has sentenced a human rights activist to 6 years in prison for contempt of court after he accused the judiciary of corruption. The charges against Gregory Chifire relate to an article he wrote questioning a court ruling in favor of 2 large South African corporations. Amnesty International denounced the case as a total fabrication and an affront to freedom of expression. Police in Pakistan have arrested the religious leader of a far-right party who led countrywide protests against the acquittal of a Christian woman. Kadim Hussain Rizvi, a prominent cleric, was arrested by police during a nighttime raid at his religious school. He had led massive protests against the Supreme Court's decision to release Asia Bibi, who was facing the death penalty after being convicted of blasphemy by a lower court. 3 non-governmental organizations involved with the rescue of migrants on the Mediterranean Sea are joining forces. They say this is to fight what they call barbarism against migrants heading for Europe. The organizations Proactiva Open Arms, Sea Watch, and Mediterranean Saving Humans say they have launched a mission to rescue migrants stranded off the coast of Libya. There have been no rescue ships in this area since September.
In these times, when countries and the European Union criminalize organizations and people who defend human rights, it's time that those organizations get together to act. And that's why we're here, to announce that the 3 organizations are starting an alliance so together they can defend human rights on the sea.
Women have taken to the streets of Oxford in their underwear in a show of solidarity with a rape victim. Here's more on that stories from around the world.
Women dressed in their underwear have protested in Oxford after a rape victim was accused of provoking her attacker due to her choice of underwear. A defence lawyer in Ireland made the remarks, causing outrage, but the defendant was acquitted nonetheless. Women at the rally wanted to send a strong message that no form of clothing should be taken as sexual consent.
The whole attitude, perhaps, of courtrooms and specifically rape cases, there needs to be a massive change there. I understand, obviously, people need to be defended and they need to have their justice as well, but that can be done, I think, without holding up someone's underwear and implying that they consented when they just didn't.
A defiant Sergei Lavrov, Russia's foreign minister, has said that his country won't beg European countries to lift economic sanctions. Speaking at a joint press conference with his Italian counterpart, he warned that the sanctions were entirely political, adding that Russia still has partners to develop projects with under the current conditions and that Italy is one of them.
We treat sanctions as a completely politicized decision. As in the case of Crimea, it punishes people for their free will. It's a serious violation of the Convention on Human Rights and other agreements on human rights. I think lawyers can prove it, having their texts on hand. On the other hand, we understand that sanctions are our reality. We are not the ones who started it all, and we will not beg our colleagues in Europe or wherever to lift them.
2 activists and critics of the Syrian government and armed rebels have been killed in Idlib province. According to reports, Raed Faras and Hamad Junaid were shot dead by a group riding in a van. Idlib is the last rebel stronghold made up of former Al-Qaeda fighters and pro-Turkish forces. The Islamic State also has a presence in the area. Targeted killings and kidnappings are on the rise.
And with that, we've come to the end of this news brief. These and other stories, as always, find them on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also join us on social media, on Facebook, on Twitter, and on Instagram. For Telesur English, I am Estefania Bravo. Thank you for watching.